And if you can cut 5 seconds out of your podcast, that is 5 seconds across potentially thousands of people's lives. You've just saved the world, the history of the world, that much more time. So if you can do that, do it.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
And we're back with the podcast on podcasting, also known as The Pop. And that is not a dad joke or a pop filter joke. It is just the POP, podcast on podcasting. And you're going to get some value today. We're going to really just dive in and try to understand how to really find your voice as a podcaster, and nobody better than Chris Staron. And I like the name Staron because I'm just staring straight. I can't even talk anymore. Staring straight at you.
Yeah.
I must be from some other country, but he's actually the podcast host of the Truce Podcast, which is an award-winning history show that explores the Christian church. He's also a writer, director, producer of a couple of films, including Bringing Up Bobby and Between the Walls. And additionally, he's the author of Cradle Robber. And Cradle Robber's got just one of those titles that as soon as you hear it, it's like you have to know what's up. When I talk about social media strategies, I talk about this hook, story, offer. I also do it within emails. Like whenever I'm sending an email, I use hook, story, offer. Oftentimes when I'm doing a podcast, at the beginning of the podcast, I'll try to give a hook, something that makes it interesting, pulls you in, and then we'll tell the story. And then at the end, you have some type of call to action or an offer, like go and follow Chris and go to his podcast or download this free PDF, whatever it is. But that title is a hook.
Yeah.
It makes me need to open up the book. It makes me want to see what it's all about. Cradle
Well, let's
Robber.
skip the interview and then we'll just read it out loud. It'll be an audiobook.
All right, done and done. All right, so you heard it here first. Chris, why did you write that book? Tell us a little bit more about it.
One of my main focuses, as we'll get into this, is what is the witness of the Christian church? So even if you're not a Christian, it's like, what are we saying with our actions? Not just the gospel message, but our political beliefs, what we stand for, what we're vocal about, how we act in public. And this book, I was going through kind of a rough time, and I wanted to write a book that addressed that sort of anger and that desire to force the world to look like we want it to look like. So it's a dramatic romance story with a time travel bent. It's a lot of fun. It's pretty deep. I'm really proud of that book. If I could still make movies, if there was money behind it, that would be the movie I would make.
Sweet. And I don't know if you're comfortable talking about the success of the book on the podcast, are you?
Sure.
Okay. The reason I ask is because I was wondering if you did it again.
Yeah.
Would you produce the book a different way? Would you use a different publisher? Would you market it more, market it less, market in different places? Would you collaborate, write it with someone else? What would you do differently if you rewrote that book?
I would probably collaborate with somebody else because the market really demands, especially in the Christian market, because I wanted to reach Christians with this book. It really demands that you write in what is known as the third person personal. So it's like you don't really have sort of the godlike voice where it speaks of every character's motivations. You really stick with one character and you tell everything from them, their point of view. So if they don't know that somebody else is up to something, then the narrator can't tell them that. And it's not a style that I like to read, but it is the style that the market demands. So it was really a fight for me. I wanted to tell the story like any other book, any other fiction book that was outside the Christian market, but the Christian market really demands that. I hate to say it, I have lived in this market for a long time, but they generally are afraid to go for anything but the lowest common denominator. And so putting it from that one point of view reaches that lowest common denominator. I struggle to do that. So if I could go back, I would say like, just get a co-author and say, here's the whole story. I'm going to write it once. You just turn it so it's a third person personal. That would be my desire.
Okay. Interesting. But you have a lot of experience, with those other movies, additionally with your podcast, and was wondering, I remember we were talking about kind of your superpower and what I think you can add to our listener, who is also a podcaster, is just how to find their voice, how to grow that voice and identify that voice and be that voice. What are kind of the key elements to finding a voice and then using the voice?
I've got 3 basic ideas that we're going to talk about here. And one of them is, what is the thing you can't shut up about? And if you don't know what that is, ask your friends, ask your spouse, ask your kids. They know. They know what that thing is that you can't shut up about. Because you got to know, when you're podcasting, you're going to be looking for content and you're going to have to live with this topic for a long time. And generally, you don't want to do a show that's just like broad, we cover absolutely everything. Only kind of like Joe Rogan's can do that. If you have an existing audience and a base, generally you want to find something that's a little more specific than that. And so what is that thing you can't shut up about? And for me, that was like talking about the history of the Christian church, how we got to where we are and how we can do better. And that's what Truce is all about. So I end up looking into a lot of history because I read a lot of history. And so that was a good sign to me. Oh, maybe I should be podcasting about this. And then also, one of the other things I think is very important is that you tell stories to your friends. And you're thinking, what are a few topics I'd like to cover on the show? When you're out with friends, if you're talking to your parents on the phone or something, start telling those stories and just notice where you have inflection, where you're passionate about things, where their eyes become glassy and they just stop paying attention to you because you don't want to cover that stuff. Really use those resources, those people in your life to find out what your voice sounds like, it's hard to do. I mean, it sounds easy because it's like, well, this is my voice. This is the voice I use for everything. But when you get a microphone in front of your face, there's a temptation to change your voice, to become much lower, to become much higher. Studies have shown that people make their voice go higher when you want someone to like you. And so you'll find on some of my episodes when I'm covering something really hard, you can hear my voice get higher. And I'm trying to fight it, but part of finding your voice is just finding out what is that physical voice? What do I sound like? What do I want to sound like? When I first started my podcast, if you listen to season 1, you'll hear that I'm imitating Phoebe Judge, the host of the Criminal podcast. I know if you listen to Criminal, it is a fantastic show, but she has kind of a quiet NPR voice and talks like that and has little inflections like that. And so I was imitating Phoebe Judge, who is, one of my podcasting vocal crushes, but that is not how I talk. There's no way I could sustain talking like Phoebe Judge as much as I admire her. So part of that came with me just listening to how I talk to my brother or with my friends. What is my normal inflection? Because as you go through your podcast, it's going to change. So learn from my mistakes. If you want a consistent sound from season 1 to season 10, start with your normal voice because it's going to get there anyway. I think that's really important. And then also, before you drop an episode out there into the ether, which can be very scary, practice an episode, maybe a couple episodes. So maybe do a dry run. And this is especially important if you've got multiple hosts. Do a dry run to figure out okay, this is when I talk. This is when you talk. If you're going to start your show with, hi, welcome to the Truce Podcast. I've got support us on Patreon, all this stuff. Figure out whose job is whose. Who's going to talk about Patreon? Who's going to talk about this special deal you've got? Who's going to talk about this PDF you can download? Those kinds of things really do smooth out the process. But just by practicing it, and you're going to find that one person is probably better at the sales stuff than the other person. And so practice those things. It also gets you more comfortable with your guest because you want to make sure that you're not super intimidated. Like, oh, I've got this amazing guest on my show. I don't know if I could put a sentence together to talk to this person. It's good to practice maybe with a lower stakes interview, get a relative on the phone or somebody that you feel really comfortable with and just practice talking. Because again, you get that microphone in front of you and things might just go crazy. You just don't know what to expect. Have you found that in your life or in your podcasting?
Well, 100% actually. When we first started the podcast that I ended up selling, I sold it just last year, actually. When we started it, we actually had 3 co-hosts. I don't know why we did that. I mean, looking back, I do know why we did that. We did that because we didn't want there was 3 business partners and we didn't want any business partner to feel like we were leaving them out. So that was the real truth. We just thought that we had to be all co-hosts. And quickly, we noticed that it was awkward. We didn't practice, like you said. We didn't practice. We didn't do what we needed to do. And some of us were more comfortable on the mic, and some of us were more just nervous. And like you said, changing our voice inflections,
Yeah.
acting more sophisticated than we'd probably naturally act in person. So I felt very much like at least two of us, me and one other co-partner, I was definitely wanting to be as professional as possible. And my business partner, Manny, was just feeling really awkward because we never had that chance. And the other part was, we were sitting around in a circle with 3 handheld mics, and we never knew who was supposed to do what. Right. So the advice that you've shared so far really would have benefited us if we would have listened to this episode a long time ago. This is like 4 years ago. So yes, absolutely, 100%. Everything that you're saying is resonating a lot with me. And it's funny how difficult it is, regardless of all of the other problems that can happen. It's funny how freaking difficult it can be to be yourself. Even if you don't think that you're trying to impress anybody, or you don't feel like you're needing to use words that you don't normally use, even if you don't feel like you're being unnatural, it's a night and day difference when you're talking to your friend or talking to yourself, maybe even, versus recording on a podcast for the first and second time. I remember it took me 6 months to even start to feel comfortable. So anyway, yeah, everything that you're saying is resonating with me, and I wish I listened to this episode before I started my first one.
Yeah. And, other things you have to get used to. It's one thing to talk to your friends in person or over the phone, but if you're going to use Zoom, which we're using right now, and you've got a video of somebody else looking at you, that can be really intimidating as well. And so when I record Truce, I use Zencastr, which doesn't have a video component to it unless you want to add that. I found myself making eye contact with the guest and not actually listening to what they were saying, which really surprised me because I was trying to give positive, visual feedback to them. Oh yeah, that is interesting what you're saying. I understand you. To the point where I wasn't paying attention anymore. I was so focused on their image that I wasn't listening. And so I wasn't asking the questions I needed to ask and the follow-ups. So that's another way that practice can help you. You can find that you like the video. A lot of my friends love the video. I don't. Terry Gross, who does Fresh Air on NPR, does not use video. She won't even be in the same sound booth as the people she's interviewing because she doesn't want to be able to see them. So she can just focus on them. And that's just a matter of taste. And if you practice that, it'll save you a lot of heartache in the long run. It also, helps you understand once you pick a technology, if you stick with that technology, you'll get better with that one. So if you have to switch halfway through because, oh my goodness, I can't handle the video, then it's going to really mess you up a bit. Practice with and without video and see which ones you like. And that'll, of course, depend, if you have a bunch of co-hosts and you're all virtual, you're not in the same room, you may have to have those little signals oh, okay, it's his turn to talk. It's her turn to talk, I'm going to raise my hand if I'm talking. Whatever your system is, you may need that video. For a solo podcaster like me, I don't need it. I actually do a lot better without it. So why do you use video, Adam?
I need the video. I feel like it helps me understand you better. I feel like it helps you and I connect better. It's more difficult for me to have an authentic connection with somebody that I don't even see. Yeah. And it's probably because I am such a visual learner. I need to be in it. I need to be part of it to be able to experience it. But I've always been the type of person, by the way, I think this is the first time I've ever shared this on this show. I'm on the autism spectrum. Yeah. And one of the things that I've learned over time is it never was natural for me to understand humor. It never was just natural for me I was just that weird person that would be playing in the puddle when all the other kids would be talking about funny things. So what I've learned kind of over the years through, high school and college is that I can still achieve kind of whatever anyone else could achieve, but it takes me a different route to get there. So I've learned patterns of facial expressions, micro expressions, smiles, cues. I've recognized patterns, which if I don't see what's happening on your face, I don't know what you're thinking. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah.
But additionally, I think that it's beneficial for me to have a connection with you. I know you just said the opposite of this, so I do think it's funny and I should maybe at least bring it up. I do feel like sometimes if I smile or look at you in the eye while we're having a conversation, then you can get a cue that you're on the right track and that you should stay there. You know what I mean? So we actually would do it anyway, even if I wasn't using the video.
Yeah.
But I will be posting this on YouTube and maybe social media and creating videograms where it's going to help my listener or my potential listener get excited about the interview. When they see you, it helps, right? So regardless of the marketing and everything like that, being able to be on YouTube also, regardless of that stuff, I've always felt that I can get a better interview when I see you and you see me. So.
Yeah. Excellent. Yes. And again, that'll depend on the format of your show that you decide to make. If it's an interview show like this, where maybe there's not that many cuts, go ahead, use the video. That's awesome. It's another great thing that you can have as a marketing tool. For me, for Truce, I rarely have just a straight interview. It's usually intercut with music and edits and a script that I write out. And it's edited like an NPR show. And so I can't really use the video for my uses. So for me, I don't need it. I can record without it. And actually that helps with my bandwidth. If I've got maybe a listener or an interview subject who has bad internet, I don't need to use the bandwidth up on video. I can just use the audio, which doesn't require so much bandwidth. So, hey, it works for different people, can use different tools. And that's kind of the beauty of this. You can make it your own. It doesn't have to be the exact same as somebody else's show.
I agree 100% with that. And I want to talk or rephrase what I heard you say about finding your voice.
Sure.
And then I've got a couple of questions about your show and how you produce it and things like that. But just to kind of jump in, you were talking about how important it is to find your voice before you podcast. And the first thing that I remember you mentioning is you want to talk about something that you just can't shut up about.
Oh, yeah.
You want to identify that one thing. And for me, I couldn't shut up about real estate, so I started a real estate show. And now I can't shut up about podcasting because I've seen so much value happen to friends of mine who have started their podcasts. Their businesses explode. They're making additional stream of income sometimes with their podcast. So I agree with you 100%. If you can't shut up about it, it's going to make it really easy for you to have a podcast on it. The second one was you were talking about talking with your friends, telling your friends stories. And my big takeaway as you were going through that was one, this is kind of you practicing, which was the third thing, but this is kind of you practicing. This is you getting feedback before you're even behind a mic. And you're able to find out what people are excited about, looking at their facial expressions.
Right.
And I think that was just really good advice. And the third takeaway that I got from when you were teaching how to really find your inner voice before you podcast is how important it is to spend that time recording a couple of episodes, maybe even pretend episodes or possible episodes or first goes of episodes, especially when you have co-hosts. And that's the thing that I wish that you were around telling me this 4 or 5 years ago, because I would have done our podcast completely differently. We ended up dropping one person off, and then later the other person dropped off and it became just me. And then we had to redo the podcast logo. We had to redo the intro and outro. Instead of here's your hosts, these 3 people, it became, and here's your host, Adam.
Right.
So anyway, we learned a lot. And so I do think that those 3 takeaways that I got from before you actually have a podcast were really, really valuable. Before I ask you about your show specifically, are there any other takeaways that you can think of that the current listener who's a podcaster needs in order to be better at their craft, especially finding their voice?
it's interesting when you were talking about having different co-hosts and how things changed. I would say embrace change. We have this idea that the podcast I start with on day one is going to be the podcast I have at episode 100. That's probably not the case. Any good podcaster has to be willing to evolve. As you learn better technology, as you learn how to make your intro shorter so your audience doesn't have to sit through 5 minutes of ads, you're going to evolve and embrace that and be open to suggestions. Like one of my listeners on Instagram posted, hey, listen, I would give you like a 5-star review, but I think that your music versus your vocal balance it's too high. Like the music is too loud. And I was like, oh my gosh, nobody told me. Nobody told me. And then so I went back and I was listening. I was like, they are absolutely right. At first, my initial desire was to be like, no, I'm not going to listen to those people. I'm right about everything. And then, thankfully I opened up my heart and was like, wait, maybe they have a point. And I'm glad I did because they were absolutely right. And so my willingness to be able to evolve made my show so much better. Your willingness to drop those extra hosts made your show better along the way, or the ability to change your logo as it needs to be refreshed, those kinds of things. I think we can be really afraid of change, but it might make the product that much better if you're willing to try something new.
Good stuff. All right. Let's start here.
Yeah.
You need to do a few things in order to be a great podcaster.
Yeah.
Not just finding your voice and not just being able to be a chameleon.
Right.
You also are going to need to market and brand your podcast and get it out in front of people.
Yeah.
You're also going to need to get good guests, and that could be subjective, what a good guest is, or if you are going to be your own guest. And you also need to figure out the sound, your mic, your headset, all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to need to figure out post-production.
Yeah.
So in your experience with regard to the process of podcasting,
yeah,
what are some of the steps that you think get missed by other podcasters that if the listener, who's also a podcaster, would be aware of it today, they might be a better podcaster. They might get better guests. They might have a better title for their show. They might have better sound equipment. What are those things? Or post-production? Or
how many hours do we have?
Good question. That means you have a few things, but I'm ready to take notes and I'm excited to hear. How long have you been podcasting? How many years have you had your show?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Over just about 100 episodes. And again, mine are very complex, so it's much more difficult than a straight interview. I think the main thing you can think about is editing. I'm really passionate about this. I used to work for a Major League Baseball team. I would edit videos that went out on the scoreboard. I've had a lot of practice at editing. And if you can cut 5 seconds out of your podcast, that is 5 seconds across, potentially thousands of people's lives, like that you've just saved the world, the history of the world, that much more time. So if you can do that, do it. And a lot of podcasters are afraid because they think, I need to have this gigantic intro where we mention every possible social media outlet that you can reach me on, and my book and your book and her book and all the. They don't need to know all that stuff every single episode. So figure out how can we get in and out as fast as we can. Don't waste people's time. And that can be really difficult because I know you think you're fascinating and you probably are. But every last one of us could use a trim. And so don't be afraid to edit. I use Hindenburg, which is a fantastic, easy to use editing software. Big fan of it.
So you do your own post-production then?
Yes, I do. Yeah. It's a one-man show, the whole thing.
How would the listener know if they should be their own post-production expert or if they should hire it off?
Yeah, it depends on what you're going for ultimately and how much time you're willing to commit to this thing. So I spend between 20 and 40 hours per episode for an episode of Truce, from reading books to booking the guests to editing the show. I try to make it like NPR quality. It's a very high production show. And so for me, I find a lot of the story in the edit when I'm doing it and very passionate about editing. And so that's one of the things that I was like, I don't know if I could ever give up editing. I know that someday if the show ever goes big, I might have to. But right now, I love to edit.
How many episodes are you publishing per week?
I do one episode every 2 weeks.
Every other week?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have a job as well?
I do. Yeah, I drive a school
Does your
bus.
podcast kind of add into what you do for a living?
It does. It pays some of the bills, but it is not what I do. It's not related to
Mhm.
what I do. So I drive a school bus for a living. That's largely for the benefits and things while I'm making the show. So even while
Yeah.
I was making the movies and writing the books and stuff, I've always had other jobs so that I could afford to do it. I'm working towards doing the show full time, which would be like mean more episodes, more frequent stuff, maybe traveling to actually interview people. I have a dream of doing that stuff, but I'm a little ways away from that now. Each of my episodes, if it's about a topic, I generally read several books about it or several resources on it. And then I interview guests based on that, usually experts on that topic. And once I had that interview, I go through and I edit. And in Hindenburg, what I love about this software, and they are not paying me to say this, I wish they were, is
I'm sure you could get an affiliate link.
they don't do it, but you can take clips and then put them in a little bin and you can assign names to them. So if I want like this 10 seconds of my guests, I can label it, put it in a bin, and then I'll write a script out and then I'll put in the name of the clips that I'm going to insert in between. So it's a very labor intensive process for me, but it's a great way for me to tell a story that takes you on sort of emotional ride, which I try to do with a lot of my episodes. So if you're like me and you like that kind of control, and you want to make a work of art, the editing is great. It's a great way to do that, but it is very time intensive. And so it sounds like for you, Adam, that you actually hired somebody to do your edits for you. And for a show like this, that's going to be a lot cheaper to do than for a show like mine. I'd have to pay somebody a lot of money to edit my show.
Yeah.
Because you're mostly cutting out ums and uhs and that embarrassing story your guest wish they hadn't told, and then adding on an intro and an outro. It's pretty simple. Probably takes them an hour to edit your show. Again, for mine, it would take them much longer.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, for me, I started by having somebody else do the editing, and I didn't quite like how they did it. So the very beginning was someone else editing, and I was a little, what's the word for it? Definitely a micromanager. Everything had to be perfect, and I'm not going to edit that out. And so what I ended up doing is I took it over, and then it just drove me crazy spending all that time. So I gave it to somebody else, and I didn't like how they did it, even after trying to give them plenty of time. And so I took it back, and I did this actually 4 or 5 times until I finally had a virtual assistant that I hired to do all of the post-production. And that ended up working, and it started working so well that we created a bunch of systems. Now we do post-production. I have a whole team. Just today it's 9 staff, but tomorrow, who knows? But we're doing post-production for tons of different teams, tons of different podcasts, and we use certain systems. But it took a long, long time for me to be comfortable giving that to somebody else. And the hardest part was understanding what was in my mind that seemed to be more intuitive, that I didn't realize could be systematic. And when I finally had my virtual assistant and I editing together, she was just so brilliant. She said, okay, well, you always do this, you always do this. I'm like, yes, that's right. So I finally gave it off to either I think it was the 5th person that I tried giving it off to. And it finally started working. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, GrowYourShow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show.
That shows you the value of looking until you find your best teammates. And sometimes that means telling people no, like you're a great person, but you don't fit with the show. And that's sort of the natural process. Having a staff, you have to hire and fire sometimes. And it hurts, but that's what makes the product better. is if you're willing to fight for the product that you want. And in my case, I have to work an insane number of hours. And, I don't make a lot of money. I'm a school bus driver. So it is very difficult for me to want to hire or to be able to hire somebody else when I don't have a lot of spare money. And that may be how it is for you as a podcaster if you're listening to this. There's no shame in that. There are some big dogs and there are little dogs like me who don't have a ton of money. But I also find great joy in editing. I think the biggest thing is finding an editing system that works for you, because there are a lot of them, like Audacity can be daunting. And you get like these free versions that can do a lot, but they're slow and they're clunky and they don't work well. Whereas if you pay a few $100s, you can get something like Hindenburg that's designed for podcasters. And it doesn't have all the ridiculous bells and whistles that you get with Pro Tools that you don't need. It's a very simple process and it speeds up. You'd be amazed, again, the value of a few seconds that you can save across 100 episodes. Just finding a great editing system that works for you can save you so much time and a lot of headache.
I have two more questions for you. The first one is these guests that you're getting, you're studying a topic, you're enjoying a topic, you're loving a topic, and then you're doing your research to find great people. I wonder if you have any element of fear reaching out to them. I wonder if any of them say no to you. I wonder if you've perfected the way to ask. If you have any tips for the listener on how to just find really good guests and get them to say yes, that would be really, really beneficial for my first question.
I think the main thing is get the guests you want. Go for the big guests. Start high. That person you think is going to say no. Go for that person because you never know. I mean, I'd say maybe 2/3 of people don't ever respond to my stuff, but a third do. And I've gotten some guests that I'm like, I can't believe they got on my show. So just aim high. That's a big thing. Another thing is be clear about what you want and who you are. So with my show, I've won a couple of awards. Podcast Magazine called me reminiscent of Malcolm Gladwell, which is like the greatest endorsement I could ever ask for. So I put that on everything. Because, generally they haven't heard of my show when I'm asking them if they want to be on it. I can kind of tease them with these little bits of like, these are the people I'm affiliated with. These are some guests I've had before. And also, since my show is a Christian show, I'm really upfront with my audience or with my guests because many of them are not Christians. And I just want them to know so that they then feel safe once they're on the show that I'm not going to surprise them with, oh, by the way, this is a Christian show. And because it's a history show, I can often work inside of the secular world to tell a story. I don't need a Christian historian to tell me the story of Guatemala like I did before, for an episode in season 3. I get any historian to do that, but they should know if they're going to feel safe on my podcast that it is a story. It is a podcast aimed at Christians. So I think that making them feel safe is important. Using tools that cut down the hassle and make it easy for them to sign up. So I use Calendly, which is a free app that you can get online. It allows people, you can set up a schedule and people just sign up for a time that works for them. And that saves so much back and forth of like, are you available on Tuesday at 5:35? No, how about Tuesday on 6:35? Yeah, it saves a lot of back and forth. You want this process to be as seamless as possible for people to just like slide into an interview. You don't want there to be any friction there. So use tools like Calendly. Send them reminder emails that have the link, like you did actually. Adam, you have a nice little system that you sent me a link that said, again, this is our Zoom link, just in case you accidentally deleted the other emails. You want everything to be just as easy as possible for your guests.
That's all really, really good info. And actually, when I was taking notes, I missed some of it. So I'm going to have to listen to that
to
again.
Your own podcast?
Yeah, that was really good. A couple of takeaways that I had was the aim high.
Oh, yes.
That you mentioned with the guests. I think that that's beautiful. And actually, that's the scariest people to reach out to, I think, for people. It takes me back to when I was 21 or 22 years old. I used to go to the club, the dance club. But I've always been a fairly shy person as somebody, I've always been shy. Yeah. And when I got there, I basically was a wallflower. At the time, I didn't drink alcohol until I think it was 23 years old was first time. Uh-huh. So here I am at the club, not drinking. I want to dance. I want to ask girls out, but I didn't know how. And so it was terrible for a long time. And then one day I just did what you said. You just aim high. Yeah. One day I went to the club and I said, here's what I'm going to do. And this will just show you how shallow I am. Of course, I'm have to talk to a Christian right now. This will just show you how shallow I am. What I did when I got there is I said, I've got to ask the prettiest girl, the first. If they say no, then I'll go to the second prettiest. And if they say no, I'll go to the third. But like you said, you get 2 out of 3 say no, but 1 out of 3 says yes. And it didn't matter. I only needed one person to say yes. And then I'm dancing and having a great time. And I feel good about myself. But you got to be okay with a little bit of rejection.
Of course.
And you've got to have that confidence to just go up to, aim high, go to the very best guest, Gary Vaynerchuk, whoever it is going to be for you and your show, go there first. If it doesn't work, go to your second best. I love that advice.
Yeah.
The second one was talking about, not surprising your guest. I think that that's brilliant. One thing that I've heard some podcasters do is they do a really good job at trying to pull out content, or they do a good job at just delivering content. They don't always do a good job at kind of showing the guest that they're awesome. So what you said there is to be able to say, not surprise them, not throw them off, help support them, help them feel good, help them feel comfortable. That's probably the only way that they're going to share the show. That's probably the only way that you're going to have a good relationship with them to put out a good show. So I thought that I really got that takeaway. And then just the systemization, automating with Calendly, something that really makes a difference for a new podcaster. Love all 3 of those. There was a 4th one, but I missed it. I'm going to have to listen again.
The only other thing I would say, if you're going to aim high, sometimes you have to get past their personal assistant. And the best way to do that is by hitting them on social media versus calling their office. If they don't get back to you on social media, then call their office.
Do you message the personal assistant?
No, I message the guest I want. Because oftentimes the personal assistant is monitoring their email or their phone calls, but they're not monitoring their social media. So you can sneak past the personal assistant by using social media. And then, of course, if that doesn't work, go to the traditional routes.
My last question for you of the day is, after the interview, after you are together with your guest, you record, you're helping the guest feel comfortable, you're helping the guest shine. After you do all of that and you're doing the post-production yourself for your show, what happens next? Like, who writes the show notes? Where does it go? Are you asking your guest to publish it or not? What kind of is the process for you after the interview?
There's a lot. So I do everything myself. Again, I am not a rich person. I'm kind of a lower class folks. So I can't afford to hire people. And I also have the idea for myself that I don't want to hire somebody outside of a living wage. So I don't want to hire somebody in the Philippines to do a job for $2 an hour. That's just part of my ethic. And so I'm going to have to do those things myself. And I have had people volunteer a little bit of time to help me book me on other podcasts. But generally, I'm doing all that myself. I'm writing show notes. I'm putting in links. As I'm researching the episodes, I will keep a running list of all my resources, and I'll post those inside the show notes and on the website. I use Canva to make original graphics for every episode, and I post those on the internet. I use Publer, which is sort of a lesser known social media scheduling tool. And then I send links to each guest when their episode comes out. I say, thank you. Here's the graphics you can share if you want. Here's a link to the website. Here's a link to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. If I do a YouTube version, I'll put the YouTube version in there. And then I'll often give them the links so they can embed the episode in their actual website if they want to. So they have like a little player. One of the episodes I did almost 3 years ago, it was one of my first episodes I dropped, is still one of the most popular ones because the lady I interviewed shares this episode on everything she does. And so I'm still getting, 3 years later, her episode on Girolamo Savonarola, for those who are history nerds, is one of the number 1 episodes. And so she has it on her website. And so you just never know just by asking somebody what's going to work. Or another thing I do is I will tag them in social media posts that are like already ready to go. So all they have to do is share. So it takes very little effort to just share something. My goal generally, again, is to try to make that process as easy for them as possible, where all they have to do is share and suddenly their network knows about my show.
So much value. Let me ask you, because we usually are cutting off about this time with most
Sure.
guests. But I do feel like even though I told my listener that I was done asking questions, I have two more.
Do it.
Chris, do you have time?
I do. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, number one, I've got at least two more. I've got so many questions. By the way, I think I got the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I was like offended, or what they call it, on the defense when
Sure.
you were talking about the virtual assistants.
Yeah.
I was curious, but I've got so many freaking questions for you. But I was like, what is wrong with hiring a Filipino virtual assistant for $2, $3, $4 an hour when that's a great wage where they are?
Are you giving them health insurance?
No, for the Philippines, actually, the standard is that they provide their own health insurance.
For me, just my personal convictions, I want them to be able to not just survive at their level, but to be able to thrive. And I want to provide for any employees I have of any kind, I want to be able to provide a safety net. Because that's what I expect out of any place that's going to hire me. I want whoever I'm hiring to have at least the same standard of living as me, which is not very high because I drive a school bus, but it's there. And that's something that you can deal with. That's one of those things. Again, I'm a Christian. When I'm praying about these things, I feel really convicted. I need to provide. Otherwise, I can't afford to hire them. That's just one of those things. It's on you. I don't want to cast judgment on you.
No. It's all good. It's all good.
I didn't know that's where yours was from, but
almost my whole staff, except for 2, 7 of my staff currently are in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And it's very affordable for me, but their side, we're paying them a huge wage where, they're living almost like kings. They're getting huge money, but it doesn't really break the bank on our side. But they're all like, this is the most I've ever gotten paid. I'm so grateful for the job. And they're just incredible people. Actually, one of them was a nurse before she joined me, and I'm paying her almost double what she used to be paid. 2 of them one's an accountant, one's a CPA. One of them so there's 2 accountants, and all of these freelancers that have done call, and they all are getting paid in many cases like double with us. And they're just like, you're the best boss ever, but it's still really affordable. I shouldn't have gotten defensive. And so do you have a sponsor for your show though? Like, do you have a sponsor that helps?
I have ads on the show, yeah.
Because I feel like that could also help offset a lot of these costs. But here's the 2 main questions coming up. 1, thank you for saying Canva. 2, thank you for talking about the emails, the links, the graphics, the embed code that you're giving to people. And that one example of the lady who 3 years later is still your top episode because she's still posting it because you gave an embed code. I got value from this episode just because you said that.
Nice.
I love it. As far as my 2 major questions, after getting off the defensive, the number 1, I want to know your absolute biggest challenge that you've ever overcome with the podcast. And then I want to know the biggest struggle that you're going through even today.
Yeah, the biggest one that I'm going through today, I'll start there because that's the answer that came to me first, is just sustainability, trying to make this a show that is sustainable on a lower income. And part of that I'm realizing I have to be more honest with my audience that if it does take this long to make an episode this high quality, there are going to be some times where I don't put out an episode, or I'm just going to have a straight interview because that's, it takes me 3 hours to do a straight interview rather than, 20 to 40 hours to do my normal episode. So part of that is seeing where I'm going and how I can make that sustainable. And a lot of podcasts, I can't remember what the statistic is, but most podcasts never put out more than like 5 episodes. Maybe you know what that statistic is.
I've heard that 90 or so percent, no, I don't remember. It's more than half don't go past 6 is what I've heard.
Yeah, it's
more than half don't go past 6.
Part of making your show is finding out how is it sustainable? What is my schedule like? How can I spend more time with my kids and also do this thing? Or whatever your obligations are, make sure you can fit it within that. And so part of that for me is just trying to make that more sustainable where I'm not putting on, originally I was putting on an episode every week and that was just like impossible. I don't know how I did it for so long, but going to every other week was huge for me. So just setting that schedule made a big difference. And then I guess the greatest obstacle that I've overcome for my show has been realizing that I am going to offend my audience sometimes. And it's going to happen on any show. I don't care who you are. You cannot maintain a gigantic audience of people and not offend somebody, especially in this day and age. So that's one of the reasons you have to be kind of comfortable with your show and what you're talking about, because somebody's going to test you on it every time. Somebody's going to find it offensive. And so that's one of the things that I've been dealing with as I get comments from people. It's like, take the good, leave the bad. And it's hard to do. But having a good support system, I've got my brother, I can run these things through him a lot of times. We can discuss, okay, where is this person right, where are they wrong? And that really helps as well. So find that system, build in that system to be able to process those comments, because you're going to get them.
Really good stuff. I would actually suggest that the listener just kind of thinks about drawing a line in the sand. We don't have time to go into the whole example of it, but the point would be that you've got to draw a line in the sand and just take your stance of what you are, who you are, what you stand for. Just like when we were going back and forth about virtual assistants from the Philippines, right? You took your stand, I took mine, and that's okay. Some of the listeners are going to say, Chris is right, it's unethical, never do it. And some are going to say, Adam's right. But we won't be able to have a following if we don't take a stand. So I just recommend that the new podcaster, when they're going out, that they take your advice when it says realizing that I'm going to offend my audience sometime.
Yeah.
Just own it, own who you are, what you are, draw that line in the sand and let people know, hey, you can come over to this side or not, and it'll be okay. You got to have that confidence. So that was huge. Talking about the scheduling, talking about how you're kind of worried about the sustainability of the podcast and what you're trying to do to overcome it with the scheduling and everything else. A lot of value. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
How does the listener find your show? And if you'd like them to contact you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can listen to Truce, that's TRUCE, anywhere you get podcasts, or at trucepodcast.com. There you can also find links to my movies, Bringing Up Bobby and Between the Walls, and my novel, Cradle Robber. And the website has all those ways you can get a hold of me, social media, email, all that kind of stuff. So thanks for having me on.
Until next time, guys, go out, grow your show, make it a great podcast, grow your influence, grow your show, grow your business, grow your brand. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now. If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of three things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.